hell that I was in, I'd do anything to be better.
I thought like a lunatic.
You gotta just have like that little bit of hope that it will get better.
You're gonna make it.
This began my surrender.
I am a witness of my own growth.
It's a life beyond your wildest dreams, and I just have to say, it works if you work it.
My story, that's what I share.
You're listening to Far From Finished, a weekly podcast where we share new, real-life stories of hope and triumph, told by the people who live them. Today's story comes to us from...
My name is Scott Geiselhart. I'm 48 years old. I live in Frazee, Minnesota. I have been a firefighter for 20 years, a volunteer fire department. Frazee is a small town, 1,300 people, roughly 1,300 people population. Our fire department covers the city of Frazee and many townships around. Like I said, I've been a firefighter for 20 years and do a lot of things that many fire departments do. We do auto extrication, ice water rescue, search and rescue, house fires, structure fires, grass fires, a little of everything. Even carbon monoxide detectors and all that fun stuff we have to run on. But about 18 years ago when I first got on the fire department, when I was a year or two in, we decided that we were going to start doing auto extrication and get the jaws of life. So we put a truck together. It was just a simple 1-ton pickup crew cab, and put the truck together and got the jaws of life, got lift bags, got ice water rescue suits, the Gumby suits, put all sorts of rope in there for the rescues, and we trained really hard to do rescue, to do auto extrication. The main thing was auto extrication, so we could get to the calls faster and get the person out and get that golden hour shaved down to a time we could deal with. And we got good. We got a really good team. We had a lot of guys that were interested in auto extrication, some mechanics and body guys, and we got good. We trained very hard and we started going on calls. And as we started going on some calls, we seemed to have a bad streak. We got a lot of fatalities, a lot of really bad car accidents, some with kids, fatalities, some with families, entire families. And in a small town, a lot of times you know the people that are in these accidents. You know their kids are your friends or they're your friends, and people you associate around the area with, and you recognize the faces, and you get to the scene and you're a foot away from their face while you're taking their seatbelt off or cutting their door off, and you know their families, and after a while it started wearing on me. I was a tough firefighter. I sucked it up. I knew it came with the calls that we were going to see this stuff, and I always told myself, well, I didn't cause this accident. I'm just here to help. I can make things better. I'm not going to make anything worse. And it over the years I kept that up, saying I'm not causing these accidents, but I ended up seeing them and having to cut these people out and as a team with the rest of the firefighters, and it started to wear on me, and it started I started noticing that I started getting angry a little bit more, and I started drinking a lot. Drank to get drunk. Started pulling away from my family. And when I was around them, I got short-tempered a lot around my sons and the girl I was with. Started having nightmares and flashbacks, and night tremors, and all sorts of things that I figured came with the territory. It's no big deal. I'm a firefighter. Firefighters drink. It's the thing I thought we did. And as the years went on, more car accidents, some fire fatalities. And the car accidents were, the worst of the worst. Everybody's, and the fire service can probably relate to seeing people burnt up in a car. It's things that you don't train to see. You tell yourself that it's not affecting you, but it starts affecting you. It's not a healthy thing to see. It's not normal. And I put up this tough guy shell that it wasn't bothering me, and I didn't think it was bothering me, but the nightmares kept going. I figured that was normal. I looked around at the other guys and I figured, well, these guys, they're handling it, and I worked my way up to a captain for the extrication and up to assistant chief, and I figured, I've got to be a leader, I've got to be strong, and I've got this under control. And I started doing meth with some friends on weekends at music events and just, at parties, just to stay awake and party a little bit longer. And after a while, that kind of grew a little bit more, and I had meth a lot, but I have a repair shop, and it never really affected my work, that I realize anyways, but I just started not sleeping as much. I started pulling away and isolating myself more and more all the time, and the anger got worse and worse. And then about 6 years ago, we got called out to a car accident, and it was a high school kid, and it was pretty well known in the area. It was a high school student, and it was a rollover and ice water rescue, and but the vehicle was upside down in the waters, and I happened to be one of them that was in the Gumby suit when we got there, and it was if there's such a thing as a perfect rescue, I mean, everything went right. We got him out in what seemed like 10 minutes. We got in the water and had him out in 10 minutes. It was amazing. Everything went boom, boom, boom. I mean, he was gone, but it was ice water, and 10 minutes in ice water isn't that long. They can revive him and slowly warm him up. And they got him to Fargo, North Dakota, and they started warming him up, and they got a heartbeat, and everything was coming around. He had brain function, from what I've heard. He had brain function. Everything looked like he was coming out of it. And then about a month later, he ended up dying of something else, and it rocked my world really hard, because that was supposed to be a victory for us. That was supposed to be the one that we saved, and we did a lot of a few other ice water rescues, and we never got to him in time. And this one, 10 minutes is nothing. I mean, they can revive him. We won, and all of a sudden he crashed and died, and I started blaming myself, because I was the one that pulled him out of the vehicle. And I started blaming myself for that. I told myself I killed him, because I was there. I pulled him out of the water. I was told he died from a lung infection, so I figured I was there, and I put something in his mouth when I was pulling him out, or something. The way I pulled him out, I did something wrong. And it started snowballing, because then I started thinking that every single one of the car accidents I was on, and every fire scene that we lost somebody on, or every ice water rescue, when I was in the Gumby suit, I was missing something. I was jinxed. They were dying because I was there. And it started building on me, and it got to the point where I couldn't go to sleep anymore because of the nightmares. The nightmares got really, really bad, and the anger was horrible. I was yelling at my kids all the time, and my girlfriend, and I started isolating myself down in my repair shop 20 some hours a day. I started doing meth every hour, so I wouldn't go to sleep. I stayed awake for about 2 years, roughly. I didn't go to sleep. I did the meth to stay awake so I wouldn't have the nightmares. Because every time I shut my eyes, the nightmares would come of my kids falling out of the sky on fire and falling into the water in front of me and drowning, and I was paralyzed, or I couldn't get the jaws to work, or I couldn't reach them in time when they were screaming. And so I couldn't close my eyes anymore. So I decided to do meth and stay awake on meth and stay away from my family, because I was hurting them all the time. It got really bad, and I didn't know what was going on in my life. I thought I had a split personality, a Jekyll and Hyde, because I could snap and be the meanest person in the world to my 2 sons and to my girlfriend at the time, and turn around and be the nicest guy in the world to a customer or to another firefighter or to a friend. I didn't treat them the same. I took it out. I was the hardest on the 3 people I loved the most. I took it out on them, and after a few years of that, I had enough one day. I yelled at him, and I had to stop myself. I figured I never physically hurt him, but I mentally, the abuse was horrible. The yelling was horrible. And in July of 2014, I decided I had enough. I yelled at him one last time, and I just had to stop it. I had to stop me from hurting them. And I figured the only way that they'd ever have peace in their life is if I was out of it. So I went down to my shop, and I grabbed my revolver, my favorite gun, my favorite revolver, and I put it to my head, and I pulled the trigger, trying to get rid of myself. and it just clicked. The hammer came down, it clicked. I mean, it was fully loaded, and it clicked, and I slammed it down on the desk, and when I slammed it down on the desk, and I jumped up on the desk behind me, and I was up against the wall, and I was shaking. I was looking at that gun, and I was trembling. I mean, the gun was going to go off. I figured it was going to go off sometime and blow my eardrums off or shoot me somewhere. It was aimed away from me, but I still thought the thing was going to go off, or something happened where it went off and I was dead, and I was seeing something from a different place or something. And it took a while, but when I got done shaking and finally got the guts to get off the table, and I reached down for the gun and I flipped it open and I dumped the shells out. And I set the gun back down in the cylinder. When I set it down, it wanted to close. And I actually had to put a pen inside the cylinder so the cylinder wouldn't close on the gun, because I was scared that gun was going to go off even with the cylinder open. I thought for some reason the bullet was still coming down the barrel. And I sat down at my desk with a gun there, and there were 6 rounds laying there, and the keyboard was in front of me for my computer. And I started typing on the computer all these different things that happened in my life on a Google search, and it was, I don't remember what it all was I typed in, but I know it was like nightmares, flashbacks, the drugs, the yelling, the anger, and I did a Google search, and I hit enter, and PTSD lit the screen up. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I hit there was a Mayo site, I believe it was a Mayo site I hit, and I went in on the second page, and here's all the symptoms right in front of me, and I had every single one of them. I'm like, how can I have PTSD? I've never been in the military. And I started to get mad because I seen that, first responders can get PTSD. And I got mad because nobody warned me about this, and nobody ever talked about it in the fire service. I heard it one time at a training one time, and they said, look out for PTSD. They didn't even say post-traumatic stress. They didn't even say what it stood for. And I remember when they said that, because I was either assistant chief or the training rescue captain at the time, and I remember looking around the room and eyeballing every single guy in that room to see if they had PTSD, to see if this stuff was affecting them. And I didn't even know what it was. I just heard the military had it, and I'm looking at these guys like, yeah, we're all right, we're cool. We these accidents aren't getting to us. We've got this under control. Well, at that time, I was so messed up on meth. I should have had a mirror. I should have been looking at myself. If they would have shown me the symptoms like I seen on the screen that day, I would have, had a chance anyways. When I figured out, the PTSD online there, I was going through and the symptoms and everything, and I got really excited because I found out what was troubling me, and I seen there was help for this, and I didn't have to live like this anymore, and I didn't have a split personality. I mean, the symptoms were all right there in front of me. And I went over and I talked to my ex-girlfriend at that time. We broke up prior to that, and my 2 sons were over there, and I went over and talked to them. Actually, I studied PTSD the remainder of that day, and then I went home and YouTubed it and stayed up all night because I didn't sleep because I was on meth still, and I went on YouTube and just researched what PTSD was and that you can get help and everything. And at 8 o'clock the next morning, I went over to the apartment that my ex-girlfriend was at, and my sons were there, and I remember storming in the room, and I was so excited in the passion that I wasn't crazy. I didn't have a split personality. I found out why I was so angry. And I told him, I said, it's PTSD. I'm not nuts. I'm not crazy. I don't have a split personality, and I can get help, and we can get everything worked out, and things are going to get a lot better now. And when I stormed into that room, the passion on my face, I didn't realize that at the time that the look on my face was probably the same look as when I was angry at him and yelling at him and just destroying their lives, basically. That they backed off from me and they pulled away from me. My sons, I remember the look on their faces when they were pulling away from me. They were scared to death of me because they thought I finally lost it. I left that apartment thinking I probably wasn't going to see my family again because they were never going to talk to me again. They thought I was crazy. They thought I lost my marbles. I went back down to the shop and into my office, and the revolver was still laying there. And I tell you what, I was feeling worse than I ever felt before that even. And I thought about loading that gun and doing it right and making sure this time it went off, because I figured it was a mistake. That gun was supposed to go off. It was meant to happen. I wasn't supposed to be alive, and I was going to have to do this. And And instead I sat down, I kind of took a little, I don't know if I took a breath or what, but I started calling phone numbers, and I called the suicide hotline 12 times, and nobody answered. And then I called 3 other phone numbers that I got prior to this from one of my chiefs, and it was like 5-6 years earlier. I asked him for some phone numbers. He told me there was some phone numbers out there. You know, he told the whole fire department for fire departments or for firefighters. And I asked him, and he gave me 3 phone numbers. And 5 years later, I finally called them, and none of them were in service anymore. They were all disconnected. And I was starting to fall apart at that point. I didn't know what to do, so I called a friend that was a police officer, and I told him what I did. I said, I've got PTSD. I mean, it's all over on the screen. It's right there. I mean, it's got to be PTSD. It's, you know, could you please go over and talk to my ex-girlfriend and my 2 sons and tell them I've got PTSD, explain to them what PTSD is, and explain to them that I can get some help. And he told me he was gonna come over to the shop, pick me up, take me to the hospital and lock me up because I needed help. And that wasn't the answer I wanted to hear. I mean, I couldn't be locked up. I just found out I had PTSD, and I found out I got a life. I can get back on track, and everything's going to be all right. And he wanted to lock me up, you know. And whether that's protocol or what, you know, I don't blame anybody for that. But you know, I told him, I said, I got 2 more phone calls to make, and I said, you know, if they don't work, I'll give you a call, and we'll do whatever you want to do. And I had no intentions of getting locked up. I hung the phone up. And I went out in my shop and I grabbed my propane tanks and my acetylene tanks. And I lined them up at my shop. And I went back in my shop and I grabbed my SKS and loaded it with tracer rounds. And I laid the rifle on my desk. And I've got surveillance cameras on the outside of my building. And the monitor was right there in front of me. And I sat there and watched the monitor for a while, waiting for a squad car to show up. Because if the police were going to come and lock me up, I wasn't going to go. I was going to blow the shop up with me in it, and not to hurt the police officers, but they weren't going to lock me up. I was in bad shape. I called another phone number. I only had 2 left. I called another phone number, and it was a local crisis unit, and it was a lady we were supposed to talk to. Again, it was another number I got from the fire department, and I talked to the lady and told her what I did, and she made me an appointment for a week and a half out. And I made the appointment knowing I wasn't going to make that appointment, knowing I was going to be dead. And I hung the phone up, and that gun was just right there. And I just didn't know what to do. The last phone number on the list was American Addiction Center's Share the Load program. And I got it from my assistant chief, texted me to. I believe he texted it to me, but somehow I got it from my assistant chief. And I know he knew how bad I was hurting, but he couldn't put a finger on what all was going on in my life. But he texted me that number when I asked, you know, for help, and when I called the number, they answered, and I told them what I did, and I told them, you know, I need help. You know, I don't know. I think I was begging them, and within 15 seconds. They said, "Scott, we got you." And it was like they reached their hands out and picked me up and held me. It was like they got me. You know, they said, "Everything's going to be fine. We're going to work through this. We're going to get you some help. You're going to be all right." And that's what I needed to hear. I mean, that's the phone call that saved my life and started turning things around. I mean, it was weird. It was like finally somebody's listening to me, and somebody that knows what they're doing. They understood what I was going through. I wasn't lost. They were understanding. I mean, they knew what PTSD was. They you know, I'm sure they've been there, you know, and they've seen the signs, and they've been in the fires. They're firefighters, law enforcement. They're not psychiatrists. They were right there, you know, on the other end of the line, understanding exactly what I was going through. And they told me, you know, if we get disconnected or somehow get disconnected, call us back. We'll call you back, but we're not going to, you know, get a hold of us. We're not going to drop this. We got you. We're going to take care of this. We're going to work through this. And they told me about something called EMDR, and they even found out a location that was in Fargo, which is only about 45 miles from where I was. And they helped me set up an appointment. And and I got an appointment for EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and we got that set up for the next day. I'm positive it was the next day because I studied it again that day. I studied what EMDR was. I never heard of it. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and I mean, I was still trying to figure out what PTSD was, and I did the research on the computer, and again I went home and did research on YouTube, and it was amazing. You know, I thought it was really cool. I seen one bad comment on there about EMDR, and I almost didn't go to my appointment. The next morning I did go and started the EMDR, and the first couple times.
Tell me about EMDR.
The EMDR, when I got to Fargo, where I had it done at the village, it was really neat because the counselor, you know, I thought we were going to go there and they were going to set these lights up and it was going to be hypnotizing or something. You know, I didn't know exactly what I was going to be going through, and we talked the first couple sessions, and he was trying to figure out what was going on in my head and where this stuff was coming from, and you know, what I thought it was old girlfriends. I mean, I went back to, you know, because I never really let anybody into my life, so I figured, you know, it was girlfriends or something. I couldn't really figure out where it was coming from. I didn't put it with the fire department stuff necessarily right away, because I was still a proud fireman that could handle anything. I mean, you know, we're supposed to be strong, and that car accidents aren't affecting me. But you know, we started talking, and we talked for 2 sessions. And then on the 3rd session, he set a light bar up that went back and forth, and it was a light bar. You know, the light went back and forth, and then they had vibrating pads on my legs, and it was amazing because, you know, you watch the light bar, and it's almost like it puts you in the REM mode of sleep, but you're awake. And all of a sudden, all hell busted loose in my head. The car accidents, the faces of the people that, you know, I was face to face with, but I blocked that out. I didn't want to remember any of it. And I was covering it up so bad inside my brain and putting it in the back of my brain and never wanted to bring it back up, and all of a sudden, boom, it was coming out. And it's the same thing as what my nightmares were, but now I was understanding where the nightmares were starting to come from. And, you know, I was seeing the faces and the blood, you know, and everything, and, you know, I could hear it, smell it. It was just like I was right there. And I was recalling things from 10 years prior, you know, that I just put out of my head that I didn't want to remember. And it was amazing because it came out of my head and went into my chest like anxiety, and then it just blasted out of my mouth, and I started talking about it, and I heard myself talking about it. And you know, I started dealing with it. And I think that was the biggest thing. Instead of stuffing it in the back of my head and never wanting to talk about it again, thinking it's going to go away, and the basket got full and it just exploded with that last car accident. And now, you know, it was all coming out. All the car accidents prior to that and stuff were all coming out. And after that first session, they opened me up. I call it opening me up, but it wasn't like surgery or anything. It was totally painless that way. But I went home, and for a week, I laid in bed for a week, just totally draining. And you know, all the emotions were starting to come alive that I hadn't felt in years. I mean, the pain, everything, all sorts of emotions. And I went back. We did this for about a month, the EMDR, you know, about once a week. And it was amazing because as we did this, it seemed like I was starting to come back alive. I started seeing a color again. I never seen in color. I was seeing it black and grays and shadows. It was just a dark, dungy world, and everything was negative. And I started seeing again. I started seeing people and the trees. I mean, it was amazing, the colors that were just coming alive. And it was like a freedom, a peace that started coming over me. And it was like it took a big, heavy trench coat that was just covered with tar or something. And I just tore it off me and let it go. And it felt like I was 100 pounds lighter. The freedom and the peace was incredible. When I went in for that first light session in the parking lot of the village, before I went in there, I didn't know what to expect. And I did meth every hour, a line of meth every hour, a minimum. And before I went in to do that first light session, I snorted my last 3 lines of meth. right there in the parking lot. And when I started the light session and stuff, and I realized the stuff that was stuck inside my head and it started coming out, I walked away from meth, free and clear. I didn't touch it. I didn't have a craving. I had it in the desk drawer of my office, all lined up, ready to go. I had an ounce of it in there. I never touched it. I never got tempted to do it. And I know this doesn't work for everybody like this, but to the level I was at, there was so much that happened from that gun not going off to, you know, to finding out PTSD and the EMDR, and it just all started to happen again. I started to be alive, and after 3 weeks, I told my counselor about the meth, and I didn't tell him prior to that. Nobody knew. I mean, my dealers knew, and some of the people I did meth knew, but nobody else around me knew I was doing meth. And I told my counselor had walked away from it, and he got, you know, obviously he got pretty mad because I was supposed to tell him about that stuff, and you know, he convinced me. He said, "You got to get rid of that stuff." I said, "Well, no." I said, "I like having it there because if it's there and I don't get tempted by it, I know I'm strong." And he says, "No." He says, "You get rid of that." He says, "First, it's illegal, and what happens if your kids find it now? And what happens if you get busted for it now when you're not doing it?" He says, "You don't need it anymore. Get rid of it." And I did. And I've never had a craving for it, and I've never been tempted. You know, I've came across some old stashes, you know, months after that, and it was just like, it was almost evil. I had to get rid of it so fast. It was a part of my life I don't ever want to go back to. But I started seeing in color, and it was so cool. It was a peace that came over me. When I got done with the EMDR, my sons were in the car with me, and I was at my house one day, and I told them, I said, "Watch this." I said, "I used to jump picnic tables when I was 18 years old." And I went out and I got out of the car, and I tried to jump my picnic table in my yard like I was 18 years old, and I didn't quite make it. I went over it and came down, and my ankle twisted, and it didn't break. I mean, it was amazing that my ankle didn't break. And my sons were laughing their butts off, and I got back like that wasn't supposed to happen. And I mean, that's how good I felt. And then 2 weeks later, I stretched out and I jumped the picnic table. My sons weren't there, and none of my nosy neighbors were out in the yard, but I actually jumped the picnic table, and I'm not going to do it again. That was good enough for me. But it's amazing how everything came back. I'm on the fire department. I took a couple months off. I'm back. I'm probably better than I've ever been. I've been on auto extrications, and you know, I realize that you can't let this stuff build up inside you, and you have to deal with it. You have to debrief. You have to talk to the other firefighters. You have to make sure the guy next to you is all right and not holding this stuff in. The phone number, you know, the share load phone number is, wow, I can't say enough about it. You know, I go around talking to other fire departments now, and this is a serious topic. I mean, suicide and PTSD and mental health, we have to start taking care of our firefighters. Suicide's permanent, you know, and wow, we just have to take care of each other, and we got to get rid of this macho thing. And you know, it's not macho to destroy your family. It's not macho to go out and get drunk and you know, raise hell in town, and it's not macho to yell at your kids or do drugs, you know, and it catches up to you. I mean, our shells are just as thick as anybody else's, and we can't let things build up on us. There's a lot to talk about, but there was one car accident that happened quite a while ago, and you know, some of these accidents you just never forget, and there's things that trigger you. And one night we're down at the this is quite a while ago, but we were down at the bar, and the bartender, she was like about 19 years old, and by the time she got to you and gave you your beer, she always had you smile no matter how bad your day was. It was just awesome bartender. And I was down there, and same thing happened, but she had this one night, she had a necklace on. It was a little tennis shoe necklace. And I looked at it and I said, "Wow, that's something I want to get my girlfriend," you know. And it was just something caught my eye. And finally, I found something actually I could give my girlfriend. She'd actually probably wear, you know. I mean, it was something that I figured she'd really like, and I didn't really ever think like that before. And went home that night, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, her pager went off, and we got called out to a car accident, and it was a car that ran a stop sign, and it went in between the dually pickup and the fifth wheel trailer, and it tumbled in between them, and it just tore the car to pieces and kind of spit it out into the ditch. They all ended up in the ditch, and when I got out there, it was this bartender, and she was gone. She was gone, and I had to go in and cut the battery cables on the vehicle. They cut the battery cable, and then I had to go in and pull her body out, help pull the body out. And when I went to pop the hood on the car to cut the battery cables, that necklace was laying right on top of that battery. And things like that you don't forget. How that necklace ended up on top of that battery. I don't know if she had to jump start that car that morning or what, and it rolled. I mean, it rolled so many times inside there. It tore the car apart, and the necklace was laying right on top of that battery. And after that, every time I seen a necklace, it would trigger things inside me, and anger. And I didn't realize that till after all this stuff happened, that things like that, the crosses on the side of the road were affecting me, and I didn't realize it. But all of a sudden I'd start thinking of things inside my head and driving down the road with my kids and family. I'd just start snapping and going off on them, and now I understand why I had such a short temper and the things that were going on subconsciously in my head. The crosses on the side of the road, for me, the necklaces. It got to the point where I didn't even I went from assistant chief down to a captain, down to a yellow helmet, down to not making any meetings, no trainings. I just didn't want to be around the fire department. And they didn't see any of the signs on that. I fooled them. I told them I was busy at my shop, and why wouldn't they believe me? They didn't realize I was on meth. They didn't realize how messed up I was, because nobody taught them any symptoms or signs about PTSD. I quit hunting and fishing. I pulled away from everybody. I isolated myself for hours and hours in the shop. I mean, I got to the point where I'd drive my car home, and this is after my girlfriend left me, and I'd drive my car home, park it in the driveway, and then walk or ride my bike back to the shop so people thought I was at home. I had my lights on timers, so they'd go off at 10 o'clock at night, and people thought I was actually home. And I was hiding down at the shop all night long on meth. I mean, there was no sense in going home. I'd stay awake for 3 days straight, and then I'd go home and lay down for 4 hours. I wouldn't shut my eyes. I'd just get off my feet and lay down so I wasn't standing up. It was, and that was my rest. And it wasn't, I didn't know what was going on in my life. I hated being alive. I hated fire trucks. I hated the fire department. The pager would go off, and I'd sit there and snort lines until I heard the last truck leave. And then I'd go down there because I knew I wasn't going to make a truck. I used to have 322 shells in my pocket. I had the little pocket of my pants, and I took the bullet out of them and I'd clean the gunpowder out. I'd actually wash the inside of the shell out because I didn't want any gunpowder in my system. And I'd crush meth down and put it in there and then put the bullet back on there. I carried 3 of those around in my pocket all the time in case I got to where I couldn't get my baggie out and chop a line, or I was at a fire scene, or I was caught somewhere, broke down in my car or something. I always had those 3. I could take it and snort a line quick. It held a really big line, and how I never got busted, I don't know. I always had the excuse that, I just found these 322 shells and I picked them up. That's what I was going to tell people if they ever asked or caught me with it. But I made every excuse and I had everybody fooled. But now, wow, it's just amazing because the dark is gone. I mean, the room we're in now, it's got a lot of light, but there's shadows, but it's not like the shadows that were there before. The color drowns out the shadows now, and I don't know if I'm getting in trouble or not, but I have a tendency of walking up and talking to girls, and I just blurt it out before I even know what I'm saying. I just tell them they're beautiful, and it's so weird because I was never like that before. I was just so numb and no emotions, and I can love now and I can feel things and all emotions, good and bad. I'm not numb. That's the bad ones come and they go, but the positive attitude is incredible.
How, can you talk a little bit about how your relationship is now?
I got a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, both sons. My younger one we're really close. I mean, man, he's been there through the whole thing. He even comes out and listens to me when I speak. We've been really close. He knows about everything. He knew about everything right away, right off the bat. And my older one, he pulled away from me, and I did a lot of damage. I yelled at them both equally, but my older one was at the age, and he took a lot more of it. I said things that I can't take back, and you know, it's you know, I don't beat myself up too much about it anymore. You know, what happened in the past happened in the past, and if I sat there and lived on that, it would eat me up, and I couldn't go on in life, you know. But you know, he's coming around a little bit. It's going to take some time. I know that. I love them both so much, more than I've ever loved them before in my life. You know, and that's the whole reason I'm doing this, is so some other family doesn't have to go through this. I don't want anybody else to have to go through this. I mean, to the point where I got, I'm never going back there. I'm never going back there. And hopefully, with what's behind us now, hopefully my sons have seen how bad stuff can get, how bad meth is. You know, and they recognize this stuff. I mean, even the signs of suicide, you know, they've seen a lot in their dad, and you know, and I was in a really dark spot, and they had to see that and witness it and be part of the pain. I hope, pray sometime that, you know, my son will come back and we'll have some really good conversations, and you know, I'm sure he will. You know, it just takes time to heal, and I put him through a lot, and I can't blame him for being angry with me.
All right.
The Christmas of 2014, right before the Christmas of 2014, we were in Fargo Christmas shopping, and my son was in the passenger seat of my vehicle, and I looked over at him, and I said, I'm sure glad that gun didn't go off. And he looked up at me and he said, Dad, the gun went off and it killed the bad dad. And that's when I realized how much things had changed in my life. The anger's gone. It's totally gone. I mean, I don't get angry. I haven't been angry in 20-some months now. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I was walking my dog, brand new tennis shoes on, walking my dog, and I was taking pictures of the house I grew up in, and they were going to be tearing it down, so I was taking a whole bunch of pictures of it. And I got a German Shepherd, and he's really well trained. And as I was taking pictures, I looked down, and my German Shepherd happened to poop on my shoe, my brand new shoe. And I started laughing. And it was amazing because 2 years ago, I probably would have kicked that dog. I would have thrown a fit. I would have blown up. And to be able to laugh at something like that is, you know, what's it going to do to get angry about it? You know, the peace is just incredible inside me now. And, you know, with my kids and the patience I have now and the calmness and the realizing that, you know, people act a certain way for certain reasons, and trying to understand, you know, that everybody has something they're going through, and to be kind and considerate of others. You know, everybody's battling their own battles and has their own stories, and it's important that we just sit back sometimes and not respond so fast all the time like I used to. That gun, we took the gun out. It was a .44 Magnum Smith & Wesson revolver. Never misfired before that. And that's why I picked it. And I think that's how God got a hold of me. God used my favorite weapon to get my attention. And after that incident, that fall, we went out as a fire department. We went out shooting, clay pigeon shooting. I happened to bring that gun out there, and they didn't know it at the time. But I loaded those 6 rounds into it. My son shot one of them, and the 5 other firefighters shot the other 5 that worked just fine. They didn't know. They didn't know till later, but that gun's never misfired. I mean, it didn't even put a dent on the primer. I mean, a revolver, the hammer comes down, it goes off. So, and so many other things have happened. I mean, I'm a colon cancer survivor before I even knew I had colon cancer. I mean, so much in my life has changed. Yeah, you know, and I'm in Dallas. I mean, 2 years ago, if you'd have told me this, no way I'd have believed you.